And the other is Zulu Ali, attorney at law. He used to be a former Marine, lawyer, and activist, still an activist and still a lawyer. And he used to be a police officer as well. So if you can take a few minutes, Donavan, and give me, just explain to me what you're doing today and what it looks like on the streets as far as Black Lives Matter is concerned.
Well, brief introduction for myself. I've been a Black Lives Matter organizer for the past 3.5 years, going to be coming up on 4 years. I started this work after I was assaulted by a San Bernardino County sheriff, and I've been going ever since. What we're seeing on the streets right now is some of the most impressive activism or social engagement I've ever seen in my lifetime. It is in multiple cities across the Inland Empire, from San Bernardino County to Riverside County to places I never think they would even take a stand. So we are in uncharted waters in that sense.
Okay. Zulu, you want to go ahead and give us a little explanation about who you are and the work that you do?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you inviting me in this discussion. I think, I'm honored to have this opportunity to speak with you guys on this really critical subject matter. As far as my work, I mean, as you mentioned, I am an attorney practicing here in the Inland Empire primarily. We do both criminal and civil litigation. We also do immigration work as well. As far as my activism is concerned, I think that you had been obviously, involved in some of the things that I've been involved in. One is, I think we were talking about yesterday, we had started the American Committee for United Nations Oversight, and had, in fact, back in 2015, filed a complaint with the United Nations on behalf of African American people regarding our rights and remedies as it related to the manner in which, I feel obviously that we have a history of being denied our rights. However, the United States is not a signatory to the UN Charter on, and so the UN does not have jurisdiction over the United States, which I'm sure nobody's really surprised about that, as well as the same thing is true for the International Criminal Court. So, I've tried to explore some resolutions on the international front. It's not very easy, but we're continuing with trying to see if we could do something on that basis. We also have the Stop and Frisk Academy, where on a monthly basis we bring in youth, primarily from at-risk youth, primarily from the inner city, to help them how to deal with police encounters as well. So that's primarily my involvement, both in the courtroom as well as the things that I do, with regards to the community.
Thank you so much. And that's a lot of things. I mean, where you make time for anything else? I mean,
oh no,
I don't know. I'm gonna dive right into the questions. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is go to Donavan and say, in context of history, where do you see Blacks in America? So, like in this time frame, do you see anything that relate to historical things that you see in our community? Or is this something like I think you mentioned before, this is maybe like unprecedented in your understanding of history?
Yeah, I would like to say that I don't want to believe this is another tide, a rising tide that's just going to fall flat on the shore. I really do believe that there's changes that can definitely be made, and I have looked back and I've looked in some different moments in relation to Black history, and I don't think we've ever had this type of solidarity at one particular moment across the board. I know someone was talking about how after Martin Luther King was assassinated, the changes that were brought about with the riots that occurred and the protests that occurred after his assassination. But essentially, there was not actual support from the public, even after Martin Luther King's assassination, for a lot of those changes still. In this instance, we are just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And people are sick and tired of seeing it. And they don't want to recognize oppression even in their own communities. How long can they keep this up? That's yet to be determined. But I do see very positive markers. I see a lot of struggles. I see a lot of differences that might be difficult to address in the near future. But I believe there are ways to overcome them and to build a solid base across the board.
Yeah, definitely. Zulu Ali, can you answer the same question, or you want me to help you and repeat it?
No, I got the question. And actually, I think that this question is probably the most important question. And generally when we have forums like this, for whatever reason, that is something that we tend to kind of gloss over or ignore. But I think when you look at it, the question always is what does justice look like for Black people? That's the question. And I think that in order for you to really deal with those types of questions, I think you have to, in order to put it in context, we have to look at the source of the problem and, what is the root of the problem? And I think that when we look at our country and we think about, well, what does it look like? What does freedom really look like? And I know that we refer to ourselves as a democratic republic or democracy, which means that, the citizens sharing equal power. But I think that when you look at the context of African American people, America basically started as let's just be honest, it was a colonial occupier, right? Mm-hmm. And that, I don't think there's no debate about that from, at least 1619 to 1776. Clearly, that's what America was. And the purpose of the colonial occupation of America was to exploit land, human and material resources, right? That was the purpose of America, right? And so, and the police were actually formed for the purpose of being slave patrols. That's how law enforcement started in our country. And so, that's really the foundations of the institution of America. However, as we move on, I think the real question is, in 1776, there was a transition, but what was that transition? I mean, was it a transition of a changing of a government that was to serve the people, or was it really a transition of just a new colonial power? So, from my perspective, I think that when you think that slavery existed for another 100 years after the American Revolution, I think that we tend to understand that for all practical purposes, it continued to be a colonial power, at least for the majority of us. And I think in order to move forward, like, institutions influence, behavior. And I don't want to go too far into this on this particular question, but I think that understanding what America really, we never talk about that. It's almost like it's something that we, it's kind of like the elephant in the room. We do know that this is basically a colonial power or a colonial occupier. That's what America really was founded on. And that basically it's an institution that was built for a particular purpose, and keeping in mind that basically the exploitation of human capital, particularly African Americans, and that many of our institutions basically were established for the purpose of making sure that human capital continued and was, that's their interest. So I think that any time that we have people who are involved in trying to help us in our issues, they're not really going to be able to help us unless they understand the root and the source of of our condition and the root and source of the issues that we're dealing with. It didn't start with that officer on the street. That's not where the problem started. The problem starts with an entire system, right? So in other words, we're talking about issues, it begins with the lawmakers, the judges, the DAs, private defense attorneys, public defenders, officers, corrections. They're all culpable in all of these things that are going on. The reason why that officer did what he did was because he felt comfortable. That's why they do what they do. It doesn't start on the streets. It starts in their organizations, as well as it also extends to the courtroom. And if you've been in a courtroom in America and understand the jury system and understand the way that it works, I think that's when you begin to kind of understand what the problem really is. The problem is that most people don't understand what the problem is. You cannot correct the problem if you don't really understand it. So I believe that is probably one of the most important issues. And I think that was a great way for you to start your discussion, because from my perspective, as we go through all of this, I'm always going to go back to that reference point of the fact that we have a legal system that basically is actually broken. And I've always used the analogy of a machine. If you build a machine to make wrenches, and then you decide you want to make screwdrivers, I don't care what you put inside that machine. It's going to keep making wrenches until you rebuild that machine to make screwdrivers. Our system was built specifically for the exploitation of human capital and to the exploitation of material resources in this continent. It was a colony, and for that purpose. And until we begin to address the fact that we have a legal system that needs to be completely rebuilt, because honestly, I'm really happy to see that we have so many people who are involved in the movement. And like Donavan said, I think there's a lot that we're really becoming more united. I think that we might have to make sure that we do focus on the fact that it's an entire system. That officer did something terrible, but trust me, the reason why those other 3 officers were standing around not doing anything is because they see it all the time. That's why they wasn't doing anything. That's the way they're trained. That's normal for them. That's not abnormal. And I think that until we really understand that and not treat it as an incident, but to treat this situation as something that is just a continuation of what we've been seeing for the past 400 years, then we're going to be right where we've been from the very beginning. I mean, we've been talking like this. I remember when you remember Diallo in New York, when they went in and they shot him 16 times for not doing anything. And when Mayor Giuliani was interviewed and asked a question, his response was, the policies work. That's what he said.
Yeah. He
said the policy working. What that shows us is it's working. That these things are not accidental. These things are it's built that way. That's the way the machine is built.
It's systematic oppression, my brother.
Absolutely.
Systematic oppression.
Absolutely.
I think what you're mentioning is the broken windows policies of Giuliani. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. And he was saying that our policy of broken windows works. And that was a result of killing someone for doing nothing. And that's part of the policy. That's part of the procedure. That's part of what they're there to do.
Right. Yeah. And I do know that basically that's kind of like the context in which he used it. However, I believe it was a little bit more deeper with regards to their value of Black lives. And I think that the system continues to make sure that as it operates, that the minimizing Black lives has just basically been the way that things have been dealt with in this country. And I think that hopefully, we'll continue to not only go, not look at it just from what's in the streets, because most of us probably don't look further than that. it goes deeper. You know, ask you this question. Let me give you a good example, and I don't want to take up too much time. And this is the only thing that I'm going to leave on this one, at least on this question.
Okay.
There's a judge in Louisville, Kentucky, by the name of Olu Stevens. He's an African American judge. He had a jury trial, a criminal jury trial, where he called out a prosecutor for systematically striking black jurors. The result of him calling that prosecutor out resulted in him being suspended from the bench for 6 months. We should have been on those courthouse steps, banging, hollering, and screaming, coming to that brother's defense, because those are the things that we need. We need people inside of the system to speak up and speak out. But we have a lot of people in the system, but it's just like being an overseer on a plantation. It doesn't matter if the overseer was black or if the overseer is an empathetic, sympathetic white person. It's still a plantation. So the problem is not the individual. The problem is the system. If the overseer is not helping you get off the plantation, then the overseer is not really helping you. The face doesn't really matter. So I think that that's one of the things that we need to focus on, is making sure that when we have people inside of the system that are willing to do something and willing to make a difference, we need to come to their defense. Those are the marches that we need to do. And I was really upset with the fact that you had this brother that was willing to go out on the limb and put his career on the line. And nobody probably even knows who Olu Stevens is.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, honestly, I don't. We have Terrance joining us, Terrance Stewart. I know him from different organizations, but right now, Terrance is part of BL, Black Lives Matter. Time done. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Terrance, and then we'll go straight into the question.
Well, man, I'm Terrance Stewart. What I do, man, most of my advocacy is for people living with past convictions. However, previously, I worked on police accountability. I ran a program called HEAT, which looked at their hiring, equipment, accountability, and training. So HEAT was an acronym. And what we did was we in Riverside County, we got a certain training implemented. Them to early implement racial profiling, stop records, and then we also was working towards their early warning system. So when officers was having incidents, you don't have to wait till the fourth time they have an incident before they would have to go through a psych review, and we look to try to push it to 2 years. So it was a fight, and it's still a fight, you know. So I do a lot of different things. Community organizing is my specialty, and making things happen, you know. And that's what I do. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Terrance. The question that I had for you is, in the context of history, where do you see us as Black people in America? So I'm using that as like looking at our past and today. Where do you see us, or do you see us any parallels?
Well, I do. I mean, I think we talked about it before, and I don't know if nobody was here, but like one of the questions that I constantly ask is, what is the psychological effects of lynching? You know, the fact that, like, you know, ever since we were kids, we have seen Black males hung from trees, you know, pictures of our ancestors, and, like, you know, who the people who were doing it. And then as time progressed, you know, you always see them images, but then things start to come, and where we're in a generation that we live in, where you're seeing live death. You know, it's not like a death of something that happened 100 years ago or 50 years ago. This was happening in real life time, you know. So now you're constantly still seeing these lynching, you know. And then, like, you know, like the purpose of a lot of the lynchings before was to keep us in order, you know. So, like, you know, sometimes I believe that that's the same kind of concept that we are in. So, like, you know, the Cadillac of 1965 don't look like the Cadillac of 2020, but it's still a Cadillac. And, like, that's still what we have going on right now. Like, it's still a Cadillac. Like, you know, racism is still alive and well. It's still being operated from the same entities that have been doing it. I was listening to I want to say Brian Cook back in the days, and he's way before my music preference, and he was thinking about the same thing that I was listening to, and listening to so many other musicians. So like, where are we in time? I think we're right where we're supposed to be to make a difference. But do I think anything has changed? Not much. No, I don't. You know, I mean, you can listen to a Malcolm X speech, and it's the same points that he was arguing. It's the same thing that we're facing today. If you listen to the Black Panthers and so many other different organizations of liberation, is that we're constantly facing the same thing. And then like, you know, where does this hate come from, and why does it hate? And is it about skin color, or is it about something larger than that? Because they know who we are, you know. And I think a lot of that has a lot to do with plays. And I think just like right now, we're in a place where we can educate ourselves, but then educate others of the plot and the struggle, you know.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and move to the next question. I would just want to make sure we spend more time on the third question. Okay. So I'm going back to Donavan again, and in your this is basically the question of, if you have some young activists first time getting involved in anything, or seeing these things for the first time, what kind of advice would you give that person? And Donavan, go ahead.
The first thing you have to recognize is individualism is not going to win this fight. You have to collectively unite. You have to see where people are fighting. You have to think. To be honest, a lot of people have tried before. We haven't been successful. But you have to, whichever way you move forward, you're going to have to do it collectively, because individually it is not going to work. And you also have to understand, right now, this is the first time that I have ever seen the United States government in my lifetime actually threatened. The last time I checked, before looking this up, people said it was a Cuban Missile Crisis, where they actually felt that the United States, that the power of this nation came under this type of threat. And that was from a Soviet state. But this, we're looking at it from the people themselves. And you have to recognize the position that you are in. And you are in a position of power. Okay. We are in a global pandemic. The United States is financially hurt. They are losing their reputation. It is crumbling away. And unless they can fix it, they are scared for themselves. People are at the gates of the White House. People are at the gates of city councils. People are at the gates of police departments all across this nation. And it has stretched the military industrial complex to its very limit. And they are essentially looking at fighting a true front war. Okay, they want to continue to utilize U.S. imperialism to oppress other people in other nations, but you can't do that and try to do it here. And when we stand together, I truly believe that we can actually break this system, but you're not going to do it unless you hold the line. So you absolutely cannot just give in to what they are offering you immediately. Okay, you have to hold the line in solidarity, almost to the point of penning revolution, if not penning revolution. And then we can talk about concessions. You see how far you can go, because right now they are scared. They want to end this immediately. And you have to recognize that this is not going to just end immediately. This is going to go on, and you need to be there. Because if you go ahead and you take the concessions that they're offering you, what did you do? You sold out your community for what? Because you didn't look at the opportunity cost of pushing a little bit harder, pushing a little bit further, making sure that they know that we are not just going to stop. We are going to keep going, and it is going to break them to financial insolvency.
So hold the line and don't concede is the advice you give. Okay.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Zulu, I love your name, man.
Thank you.
I love your name. Go ahead, please.
Well, I think that my response would be, or my advice would be to, I think there's an issue of focus, and well organized. And the reason why I say focus is because I know this is an extremely, probably going to be an extremely unpopular response. But one of the things that we have, unfortunately, and again, it's not necessarily a criticism, but I think it's reality. We have to make sure that when we are going out and we're trying to have our agenda, and it's okay for us to build alliances with other organizations, but we often, and this has definitely been our history, whenever we've been marching, and oftentimes people have benefited from our struggle, and other people have benefited from our work. And just because you have individuals who are actually going to come in and try to assist you with what you're doing, you have to make sure that they have our interests and our focus in mind. It is not a reality that all oppressed people can pursue the same agenda and get the same result. If that was the case, we obviously would not be dealing with some of the things that we're dealing with as far as our fight, our years of fighting. So my thing is that basically make sure that there is a focus on the agenda at hand, that when we build alliances, it's okay to help other individuals with their struggles as well. But understand that everybody's interests are not always aligned. And definitely for African Americans, our interest is not always aligned with some of our brothers and sisters who have other interests. It doesn't work, and it's not going to work. And if we're going to have somebody that's going to be on our team trying to assist us with trying to achieve our agenda, then they need to really be on our team. And if they're going to be on our team, then they need to really understand, what they're dealing with, what the issues are, and try to educate people the right way. And oftentimes, another thing that I think that we should focus on with people who are trying to get involved in the struggle, we have to stop parsing our words. I mean, we can't sing the same song and dance. We have to be honest and open about really what's going on. And we just can't come out when it's convenient. I mean, a lot of people are coming out now because obviously there's a lot of George. We know this, a lot of Floyds that we've dealt with in the past and that we're going to deal with in the future. And so when it's just like, for example, some of the and it's great to see people who are out willing to protest on our behalf for whatever the wrong that we're experiencing in our community. But we don't have the choice. When you go out and you're protesting and you get hit by rubber bullets, that was your choice. But for us, it's not a choice. That's real for us, and typically it's not rubber bullets. They're coming out. So my thing is, I just hope that our younger people stay focused and be real about what's going on, and understand that if you're going to align yourself with other people, then make sure that you're aligning yourself with people who really have our struggle, first. And if we don't do that, then we're going to end up back where we always end up, back in the same situation. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, definitely focus on the agenda, right? And don't
Right.
parse your words. That one hit home for me, especially. I just left one of those marches in Riverside, and someone approached me and asked me questions, said they do advice for the police department, and asked me how Riverside is and community relationships are going. And when he talked to me, and I told him, they don't have to do anything, so they're doing a good job because no one putting enough pressure on them. Mm. And he smiled, and he was a little sarcastic smile at me, and I kind of smiled at him as well. And I said, well, look at Oakland. What happened when the brother got tased, right? Mm. And he was supposed to got tased, but of course it wasn't a taser that he got hit with. He got hit with the bullets.
Right.
So when the jury came out on that, there's some brothers that was on a rooftop shooting at cops. And when I told him that, he smirked and he said he was there.
Wow.
And I said, Oakland was a mess.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, Oakland was a mess. It didn't end well. I said, no, it didn't end well for anybody. And the community at the end leaves. Yeah. So, I'm from a way back when era when LAPD, Los Angeles, Long Beach PD, and all these places used to ride 2-car deeps with two people in the car because people were shooting at them from roofs. So it's a different world we live in today. I mean, I'm not advocating anything like that. I'm just letting you know because that was a reality. And I don't think we talk much about that when you say parsing words. So I'm gonna let Terrance. I know I kind of took the seat for a minute, but this is about Terrance. Can you give some advice to the brothers and sisters that's entering in this for the first time?
Well, you know, I the word Nipsey, you got to think marathon, not fast sprint. You know, a fast horse don't run long. You know, and a lot of these youngsters, you know, what I mean, like some of them will come in and you know they want instant change. You know, what I mean, and that's what that's what we all want. You know, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Also, like you know, for me, like what's bigger role that I've been playing this rip is like you know, it's it ain't about me. It's like you know these youth are coming up and it's their generation and letting them lead. You know, I'm almost 40 years old, and you know it's a new generation coming up under us, and you know it's how can I support them? You know, if you know I mean the youngsters can't get to the legislation, how do I teach them how to get to them? You know, providing the youth with as many tools as they can to fight for our future. You know, because like the more that they're prepared, the better that they can fight. You know, so in this moment, it ain't so much about me getting out leading in it no more, but helping you know other people that are up and coming. You know, support them. You know, I'm here to support my brother Donavan. You know, I'm here to support my brother Cheese and so many other people that's out here and sisters that's out here that's up and coming that they got their head on together. You know what I mean? And like just being a big homie in the struggle is more of my role now. You know, and when it's time for them to probably meet with a legislative, I have different strategies on how to meet with legislators and like you know just run it by them. You know if that's what they choose to do. You know if they need to be in the newspaper, I have a couple of lines to the newspaper. You know, so like now more what I'm doing to like to try to engage more people is just helping provide opportunities for their movement. Listen to them because you know if you think about it, like you know, previous leaders like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Fred Hampton, Bobby Seals, when they started him, and uh, um, um, Huey P. Newton, they were all young when they first started. So like you know, it's a lot of energy within the youth, and let's uplift them. I mean, that's my thing right now, is to uplift the youth. You know, I done did a lot of work and I'm here to support them. And I feel like that's more of my role this time than to be the person all in the front. You know, is to help the youth that's up and coming be that much more powerful in their organizing and lift them up and stand behind them, you know. And so that's what I feel, you know. I feel like, you know, the youth is the truth and they're not just the future, they're the right now. So my daughter, you know, she been phone banking since she been 2, you know, and it's to continue to bring up leaders up under us that can lead the movement, because like one of the biggest fears that I always have is that like we'll fight this movement over and over and over again, but like my face will be on it, and if something happens to me, the movement dies with me. So now it's like, you know, it's try to teach as many youngsters how to keep it crack-a-lacking so that you know their generation ain't got to deal with the same thing, and we don't have to continue to see these same images of lynching that we've been seeing for almost God knows how long.
Yeah, definitely. So marathon, right? So youth is the
Yeah.
truth. I love that quote. I'm gonna steal it from you, man. It's a great quote.
Well,
One of the things though, we came up on a title of this, Black Lives Open America, and I want to clarify it before we go into the next third and last question, because I want to make sure that we understand that all the things that happened in now or happening now is because we moved. It wasn't because coronavirus or anything else. It's because something happened in our communities and we moved the pieces. Now that if that's not power, I don't know what is. One of the
Right.
other things to keep in mind is Korea and right now Hong Kong and other places that were protesting. Hong Kong being one of the places that were protesting China is back in the streets again. And then when you look around the world, all the other cities that have been protesting these different dictators or different issues, whether it's global climate change or anything else, they seen us in the streets. They first joined us in the streets because this is why you've seen all the other people other than African Americans in the streets. You've seen whites, Latinos, and all these different other people from these different movements felt that liberation that we wanted to feel, right? They have the opportunity, but we didn't have the opportunity, and we went to the streets. And when we went to the streets, we opened the doors for everybody else. And for the guests and all the people who are listening, I want everyone to keep that in mind, because when, as African American Muslim male, when I talk to people about things that we have in our community, it seems like people are not listening. Like I have, I can't be validated unless someone validates me. So when you see the power and you see the things that we did in our communities, you know, some of the first grassroots organizations, you'll find Muslim names in it because we created these foundations. So going into the third question or the last question, and this is specifically for the IE, because once the pieces are moving, we need to be able to look at this environment and say, where do we go from here? How do we take advantage of these movements? So make sure, like we said before, we focus on our agenda, that we hold the line, and that we bring up youth who can actually do these things, because we can't be here forever, right? And as the brother said, right, Nipsey Hussle, it's a marathon, right? So the last question, I'm starting back with Donavan. What should be our agenda for the IE moving forward, and how can we start that now?
So for the Inland Empire, you know, it's extremely tough to organize out here. You know, there is a lack of solidarity from our immediate neighbors to the north and to the south. To the high desert area, we do have, you know, Black people, and through the high desert to the Inland Empire, you know, San Bernardino, Riverside County, we do seem to stick together in that regard. Now, with relation to the Inland Empire, we cannot continue to, you know, serve other counties. We have to serve ourselves. And we have to look historically, like Brother Zulu Ali said, that, you know, this country was built on the exploitation of labor. And now we're starting to, you know, it seems like the gains that previous movements have made that we've lost. And they are essentially exploiting our labor out here. I remember 2009 with the housing crisis collapsed, and our community just fell apart. And I seen the tent cities and people living outside and camped up and begging for food. But what I also seen is I also seen people come together. I also seen the crime go down. I seen people literally forming communities because they knew that's what they had to do to survive. But unfortunately, at that same time, an individual by the name of Jeff Bezos sees the opportunity to capitalize on our misfortunes, and he essentially bought up a very large portion of the Inland Empire to profit. And the profits that he is making with his company, Amazon, have not been distributed to our own community. And considering the situation we're in now, I believe he's going to double down on his investment, and we are going to be in a we're going to be in a worse situation than we were before. And essentially, this man is going to control the labor market. So what we have to do is we are going to have to organize and, you know, unionize against this man. He's given us no concessions. He's given us no leeway. And if we don't do something about it, we're doomed. I mean, we're essentially dealing with the most powerful capitalist in the world in one of the most poorest cities and counties in America, and that is San Bernardino. And we can't ignore that fact. It's just historical. It is somewhat economic. to just our area, but it doesn't get talked about because nobody really pays attention to us. So we have to look to each other. We really can't, in this regard, we can't look to anybody else. Yes, I believe in solidarity across the board, but I also believe in solidarity on the home front. And we have to put Black people, I do believe we do have to put Black people in the front of this, because we are literally the second-class citizens that have been the underserving backbone of this nation, and we cannot continue down that path. We have to dismantle this system of oppression, and not let it return.
So you're saying organize to make sure global capitalists pays their due, right? Is that directly to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we cannot ignore that Jeff Bezos literally owns an entire international airport in our county. He literally owns San Bernardino International Airport. He owns a quarter of Ontario International Airport. Okay, UPS, which employs quite a few Black members. Okay, they are looking at financial failure out here because they can no longer compete with this individual. So the thing is once this man controls the wage market out here, we are in trouble. Okay. And it seems like he's not going to stop. He's taking the airports, he's taking transportation, he's taking shipping, he's taking over logistics, he's taking the warehouses, he's taking the direct model of business from small businesses to the consumer, which I always will encourage people to try to buy your products direct from the business. Don't buy them directly from Amazon if you can avoid it, because he's going to profit off of that. And he completely controls it. I mean, we can't ignore it. And we also have to consider the environmental impact of it out here, which it's not looking too good. And he's given us no concessions on that. And if we don't look at Black people's health in regard to environmental racism, it's not a good thing out here. It is not good. And I know I know a lot of people don't think about this, but this is the reality. This is how we ended up in this situation. And like I said, as long as this man can continue to put his foot on our neck, he's going to do it.
Okay. I'm gonna skip to the brother Terrance, if you don't mind, Zulu Ali. And Terrance, what should be our agenda out here? I know you spoke a little bit about developing young people to keep the movement alive, but I mean, what do you think our move should be? I mean, think about the opportunity we have now. We have all these people in the street.
That's exactly right. I mean, for me, as a community organized, like everybody say, it's organized. And I think it's an interesting time because, okay, today they charge the other 3 people, and then they amped his charge up to 2nd-degree murder. So like the question is that we know in a few months or however how long it's going to be a verdict, and this could go, all this stuff can kick right back off. So it's like this got to be like the negotiation stage to say with other politicians, with the police, with the sheriff, everybody, they need to be doing what they can do right now in Riverside County, San Bernardino County, to ensure that that they're creating relationships and they're building stuff that if something jump off, people will be less likely to act up. So they need to start, if they know that one of the things is that officers is having with all these previous excessive force cases. So if don't hire people with a whole lot of excessive force to say that that we're not going to do it. It's a lot of things that they need to do right now in this moment to ensure that if anything happens not right, that they did their best to reach out to the community to make sure that we are right in whatever proactive steps, so that incidents like this do not happen in Riverside County. And they have to be proactive. I just left this rally, and it was members of the community there. It was elected officials there. It was all these different people that have the power to change policies and to create something. So I think Riverside County, San Bernardino County needs to be to the point where they're taking a progressive step, a proactive step to control policing in our city and like for the first time ever, like lead the charge and not sit back and wait for another county to make a decision that we follow behind. So I think like, it's time for us to organize, but we have all these people right here. They need to get together with the leaders and the stuff and we find out what exactly do we think will be the progressive step that we need to take next and pull the trigger and make it happen. And like Riverside, San Bernardino County, the IE leads the way for California to be safe, instead of sitting back and waiting for somebody else. So to start that, it's gonna take some little local organizing committee. And you know what I mean? It's a lot of different people that are sitting down together. Let's get together, let's quit working in silos. That's a whole big thing that like, I don't mess with them because they over there or they or this over there. We need to put our you know, put all our emotions and all this past beef in our pockets and work for ensuring a better future. Because if not, this vicious cycle will continue to happen, and the Cadillac will remain the Cadillac.
Thank you. You're saying about a maximum pressure campaign. We got the opportunity. The people are in the streets. We need to make sure the demands are made. Make sure that the people know exactly what we want. But I'm pretty sure we already have demands. We probably need to revise them and really put the people feet to the fire. Make sure they understand our demands. Make sure they understand what we are capable of and how we can move this so that we can make sure our cities are safe. Because regardless of where you live, you want your city to be safe. You can tell me about other places around the world, but where you raise your children, when we live in the IE, we want our communities in the IE to be safe. So definitely a maximum pressure campaign is something we should look at, and making sure that these changes are permanent is something as well. Because a lot of times we have these things in just a swipe of a pen, like next week, and this goes back to Zulu Ali's point that he made earlier. So Zulu, you can take it away. We have about 13 more minutes, man.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, one of the things that Brother Donovan was talking about that kind of, wasn't part of really where I was going with it, but I think it's a very important point that he made when he talked about the issue regarding the owner of the airport. D.L. Hughley, I was watching, he was being interviewed not too long ago, and he made a very interesting statement. And I'll just kind of expound on that a little bit as it relates to something that Donovan said. He said that, that Trump has been bragging about the fact that during his administration, African Americans had one of the lowest unemployment rates. And he said, well, during slavery, that's when we had the lowest unemployment. And I think that's an interesting point, because we should not be focusing on unemployment rate. We have to change our focus in thinking about owning the plantation. We need to make sure that we understand our economic power and focus on ownership. That's extremely important. And I believe that, it's good that the brother made the connection between empowerment in general when it comes to the issue of justice, and empowerment when it comes to economics. I mean, let's just be frank here. America is all about money. I mean, that's really what America is. I mean, like I said, it was this was an economic colony. That was the purpose of it. Although many individuals that were sent here as a penal colony. But that's really the focus. So I think that's really important. Another thing I want to talk about is the fact that for my thing is to talk about the Inland Empire, and I kind of want to talk about the Inland Empire, but I also wanted to kind of expand on this because I think it's relevant regardless of where we live. I think that when we talk about the issue of how we're going to deal with things, we definitely have to change our focus. I think that basically when we talk about dealing with it, as I said at the very beginning, we just have to expand on being a little bit more focused on making sure that you have to understand that nobody's going to give you your freedom. And I think that sometimes we feel we don't feel good being uncomfortable. And I think that if we're really going to see any expansive change, then we're going to have to start doing things that make us feel uncomfortable. And most people, unfortunately, aren't willing to do that. I would dare to say that my gut feeling is that, unfortunately, if we're talking on this subject a year from now or 2 years from now, that we're probably going to be talking about the same thing and in the same situation. And we can't continue to do the things that we've done in the past. And we truly have to understand that in order for us, in any people, just read history, nobody's going to give you your freedom. And you know, and I'm not begging anybody for mine. And so I think that I believe, and I'm not advocating violence, and I'm not trying to, you know, people say it's radical. It's not radical. I mean, that's how the American Revolution was radical, I guess they would say. But I think that we have to change our focus if we really want to see some real change in our society. And it is a crisis. This is like a pandemic for us. I mean, there's actually some really reliable statistics that say that of all the Black prison population in the world, of people of African descent, 50% of those people are in prison in the United States. Look at our prison population. Look at the numbers of people that have died at the hands of law enforcement. Look at the numbers of people who have been incarcerated. They're always overcharged or sometimes just convicted of things that they didn't do. You don't get a fair trial. The juries don't look like us. I mean, these are continuing issues that we need to demand and not request. I'll be honest with you, I'm not really into believing that if we're going to go into a meeting to try to bargain our situation, we need to have bargaining power, and we need to be very firm about the things that we want. You're not going to continue to take our humanity. That's not going to happen. We all have to, harness that type of attitude, because otherwise we're not going to be able to protect our women and our children. You know, we've seen police officers disrespecting and beating on our women, disrespecting and beating on our children. We see an entire system that sees the same things that we see and aren't making any massive changes. Trust me, if we can, go into a country and, dismantle a dictator and take over countries, we can change things in our community. And it doesn't take much time. If you believe it's a crisis and you believe it's a pandemic, you're going to change it. Just the same way that we did with COVID-19. We shut it all down. And I think that that's what we need to do in our system. This is a crisis. We're losing young men and women at numbers that's unprecedented, much more than what we're seeing with this pandemic. So I think that we're going to have to be a lot more firm about taking our humanity, taking charge of our own humanity, and being clear that we're not going to allow anything like that, to happen again. I mean, Lord forbid if I seen a police officer that was choking, and I'm just going to be real. And I think that we have to look at it like this. You're not going to be choking my children. You're not going to be choking my women. That's not going to happen because there's going to be a problem. I have a right for my humanity, just like everybody else does. And we're not going to take that. And they have to understand that. And I think that as we go forward, we need to make sure that we demand things. We can keep begging for your humanity and we can keep begging for your freedom. But I'll get, I'm not a betting man, but I bet you everything that I own. They're not going to give you nothing. If they haven't given it to you in 400 years, they're not going to give it to you overnight. They've been seeing this the same way you have. And I think that we're basically, there's some sort of illusion to believe that we're going to get it that way. And there's this illusion to believe that there's people in this country that's going to give it to you. But trust me, look at history. The people that get their freedom, the people that have to take back their humanity, have to demand it. It's not going to be given to you, just like anything else. The same way we got the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is going to be the same way that we're going to have to move forward. We just stopped. So, my advice to people as we move forward is we're going to have to get a little bit uncomfortable. Did I run over my time, my king?
No, you're good. We got 5 more minutes. I was just going to close out, make sure we have mostly Muslim audience. So I want to make sure that we bring it, bring some deen, a little bit of deen into this as well. And what I'm going to do is just read a verse of Quran for everybody. And this is Surah 4, Ayat 74. It says, and why should you not fight in the cause of Allah and those who, being weak and ill and oppressed, men, women, and children, who cry is, our Lord, rescue us from the town, whose people has oppressed us, and raise for us for them one who will protect, and raise for us from thee one who will help. So even in that prayer, this is important to keep in mind, and how this relates to the Muslim community at large, is when you're standing by and seeing another group get oppressed, and the men and the women and the children are asking from Allah, then their dua is against you. Just keep that in mind. Their dua is against you. This is for those who have the power, who have the ability. For those who are weak and oppressed, there is a different ideal for that. But for those who have the power, those who have the ability, and who has been decided to take the side of someone else, as I have said in other times, under the shade of racism, a lot of people hide because it's cooler there. And under that shade, some people can hide because there are a lot of shade lighter than others. And some people who can't hide, who are not that shade, are not getting shaded as much. And keep in mind that the death toll of African Americans in America is actually a buffer for all the other people in America. Because when we talk about prison population, the number one prison population, of course, is white. We talk about people on welfare. The number one people on welfare is white. The number of people who getting brutalized by police, because we have a policing epidemic of what is called, where these individuals, this epidemic of this policing is about these people who can't just beat black people, because as they see the black person, they know they're human. So when they go home, or when they deal with other people, another ethnicity, they're going to have the same reactions. Because in the end, it's about control. I mean, I talked to other people before about the ideal of you're trying to gauge control. When you're trying to engage control, it doesn't matter who it is you're taking it from, just long as you get it. The same is with power. Once you create an institute, like the brother Zulu Ali said earlier, about you're making wrenches, you're not going to make all of a sudden screwdriver unless you change the machines. So the machine need metal, and the metal in this prison industrial complex, the metal in this capitalistic system is people. So you're going to run out of black people to put in the system, and then there'll be everybody else coming in. And there's this old story this brother told me about these 3 fun colored cows. There was a light color one, dark color one, and a medium color one that looked like a lion. And the lion convinced the medium color one that if he works with him, he will spare his life. He just need one lion. He just need one cow. But after he ate the first one and then the second one, and he came to the cow, the fawn colored cow that looked like him, and said, "Hey, you know what time it is?" In other words, and the cow said, "Yeah, when you ate the first one, I knew my time was already up." So this is something for our broader community to take in consideration, is that if you allow this system to roll over us, who's next? If you allow and stand silently while a system of oppression is designed and is being fulfilled, and there are, as they say, is rolling over all these other people, then it gotta keep rolling and it gotta keep producing wrenches. So it needs the metal. So we are the metal. So when you run out of us, it's you. So we don't want that to happen. So when I see myself on the front lines, I recognize one thing, that we're holding the line for humanity, not just for African Americans. And we're going to end on that note. In the name of God, the most gracious, most merciful, I bid you good night, and good day. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, brother.
Alaikum salam.